Hello, everybody, as we make our way into our virtual town hall, and welcome to today's Australia at Home discussion. I see a few familiar faces and a few new friends. It's great to have you all here. Where today we're launching GoFundMe's annual Year in Giving report. Our friends at GoFundMe have been doing some amazing work through the year, and we're going to be having a chat to Nicola Britton from GoFundMe and some of the people that took the step of initiating GoFundMe campaigns over the last year and sort of looking at how that's contributed to their community. We've been working with GoFundMe this year, which is why we've invited them into the room. And the one thing that's really struck us as we've got to know them is that how in a time when people are relying obviously on government and charity for support, there's also this huge capacity for community to come and fill in the gaps where, in a time of need, whether it's bushfires, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's the, tribulations of day-to-day life, that there is a space to be filled from individuals taking a leadership role from the ground up. And we're great to have a couple of those individuals joining us today as well. Before I introduce you to our guests though, I do want to pay respects to the traditional owners on the land on which we all meet. I'm on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I'm sure that you will join me in recognising and paying respects to elders past, present, emerging and recognising this land that we are all on was never ceded. If you are new to Australia at Home, we love to have people with their cameras on, being engaged in the discussion, and use the chat. So if somebody makes a comment that you're interested in knowing a bit more about, or if you've got some ideas on campaigns that you'd like to see being run from the grassroots up, use the chat and we'll call you into the discussion as we go. So before we get cracking, I'll just do the intro. So we've got Nick, hello. I think you're in from Sydney as well, Nick?
Sure, yeah.
We've got Mariska Ascher, who's down in Malakuta, and she's a community fundraiser after the bushfires that were there from almost 12 months ago now. So hi, Mariska, if you're around. Wave.
Hey, everyone.
Hello. Whitney, who's the director of the Currumbin Wildlife Hospital Foundation. Hello from sunny Queensland. I'm assuming it's always sunny up there, isn't it?
It is.
And we've got Corey Tutt, who's a founder Indigenous mentor, who ran a campaign for Deadly Science. G'day, Corey, and thanks for joining us as well. So before we go into the individual stories of leadership that we're going to highlight today, I thought we'd just sort of, for those that don't know much about GoFundMe or have just seen their name around about, because whenever you see somebody doing something off their own bat, it seems to be via a GoFundMe, have a chat to Nick about the GoFundMe story, how long it's been operating in Australia and what's the mission of the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good timing actually, Pete, because this month we are celebrating 10 years of GoFundMe. Only 5 years down under, but 10 years since our founders launched GoFundMe over in the US, and at the time it was called Creator Fund, and it was largely just they set up a fund because they were crowdfunding for something that they personally needed, and just kind of set up a web page, and then they thought, actually we could take this further. There's lots of gaps in society that need plugging with donations from people that are passionate about those causes or people that know you, whether that's a birthday fund. I've recently just done my own for a charity challenge, and also it was my birthday recently, so people were chipping in, and they realized quickly that there are, from building GoFundMe, there are a lot of ongoing gaps in society that constantly need plugging. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Pete, when you're saying, since we've worked together, and certainly since I've been working at GoFundMe for 2 years now, I'm just ongoing and time again surprised at the generosity shown on the platform, but also the evolving and ongoing use cases and needs on our platform. So it's kind of like, it's very hard to capture in one sentence why GoFundMe exists, because that continues to evolve, and I think you'll hear that today with the stories that we've seen this year on our platform. But generally, as people, as society evolves and crises emerge, and we can't predict the future, nor can we plug gaps of our history, and that's when community leaders are really stepping up to take action themselves, and they know best, and they know where the funding needs to go, so they launch GoFundMe pages to help plug those gaps.
Yeah, we kind of, I don't know if it's we've observed that you almost become an early warning system when things aren't working in the community. So, you know, I think, and we can go through the journey of the year in giving in a second, but from bushfires where the support wasn't getting onto the ground quick enough, to people being stranded overseas because they couldn't afford the business flights to get home, to Indigenous communities through the middle of the year, through that wave of global recognition of race issues. It seems that if the GoFundMe emerges and you see it rising to the surface, something's going on to cause it to occur.
Definitely, that's correct. And I think one of the things that we're really passionate about, our team here on the ground in Australia, we're here really just to protect our users and donors and make sure that generosity is safe. And I think one of the things that we do see, and we don't like really to tell the stories of our organisers because it's their own story, but as things do bubble to the surface, we do get this very early heads up on an issue. So on March the 20th this year, we suddenly saw that during that week, lots of funds of people stuck overseas starting GoFundMe campaigns to pay for business class flights, and that has since evolved into paying for hotel quarantine, because sometimes people can get back from overseas on relief flights, but they can't afford the hotel quarantine, and even state-based quarantine, as we saw people having to move between states during the height of lockdown for personal reasons. I think when we talk about community this year on GoFundMe, I think community means something very different to each and every person. They have their own community, and that's also reflected on the types of fundraising campaigns that we see. So it's no two campaigns the same, and at the heart of the giving trends this year, I think, is like a real sense that we're all in it together. So whether you're stranded overseas or you're a passionate Indigenous mentor like Corey, who we've got on the call, and trying to help those within his own community, it means something different to each and every person.
So take me through the year in giving. What if you basically crunch all the different campaigns that are run off your platform in Australia and then get a sense of what's gone on? So what's the story for you out of?
Well, the story is it was incredibly hard for the first time ever to pull out a key theme because it's been a year like no other. And I know people have heard that time and time again, but when our team sat down to crunch the data, it was astonishing how many micro trends there's been and how many very new use cases of our platform we've seen this year. So I guess GoFundMe, and I think a lot of people just think GoFundMe is a place that families turn to in times of tragedy, and whether that's to fund a funeral and a memorial or a unexpected diagnosis of a long-term illness in the family that sees you out of pocket and funding out-of-pocket costs for medical expenses. But that, obviously, that still happens, and those needs are still there. But what we have seen is an array of very unique use cases. So we started off with the bushfires in January. There was $31 million raised in January alone for bushfire victims. And interestingly, the amount raised was split between personal and charity fundraising. So it was split pretty much, it was 51% of people and Australians fundraising on behalf of the victims, to people that they know who had lost their homes, but also people and celebrities and influencers around the world starting GoFundMe campaigns for charities on the front line of the bushfire crisis. So it was all hands on deck, everybody fundraising. And we work really closely, Mariska can talk you through very shortly, with the communities who were fundraising on the front line, who needed instant relief. Interesting trend, again, I'm sure Mariska will be able to tell you, is fencing was in high demand. So we had people launching fencing for fireys and getting out there, buying fences from Bunnings.
So really specific,
very specific, yeah.
Campaigns, yeah.
Yeah, and very, we have crisis response protocols that we deployed so we could speak to as many campaign organisers as quickly as possible to verify and vet their fundraising needs to try and get the money into those communities. And then just as we were coming up for breath, we went into the national lockdown. One of the trends that we saw very early days was Australians trying to get back home from overseas, and then small businesses turning to GoFundMe to fundraise, to pay for rent relief. A lot have international students working for them that weren't eligible.
There were some lovely stories of communities pooling resources to support international students in their community.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were stuck here when, so reliant on casual work, but also weren't eligible for job keeper. So that is what we were speaking to earlier about, people really falling through the cracks. That was a really prominent trend. And we've also seen a triple, 3 times the amount of donations compared to last year to causes, Indigenous rights causes. And Corey, an absolute champion for this issue on the ground, and can speak in more colour to the need and the demand and where the donations are going. But there was also in May and June millions of donations going directly to families who were campaigning for justice after losing loved ones in police custody. And that was a big trend throughout June. And we're kind of ending the year on a very, very diverse kind of use cases. We're seeing a lot of support for barley, and there's really strong ties, charities on the ground supporting those.
Also, we're supporting the businesses in Bali that we would normally be supporting by going.
Yeah, absolutely. So 80% of Balinese are reliant on tourism for their main source of income. So there's a real issue with poverty at the moment. And Australians obviously enjoy holidaying over there, have very strong ties. So again, that's another trend. So it's really broad across the spectrum. And on the charity fundraising side, through our charity fundraising tools, we've seen a shift towards especially in the past, I'd say 8 weeks, towards fundraising for mental health charities. As I think Australians are starting to step up and realise that we're not through the worst of it yet, and people may need some mental health support.
So what was our magic figure? You had 1 million Australians contributing to GoFundMe last year. How do we go compared to that in 2020?
So it wasn't 1 million Australians, but 1 million donations, and this year it's 1.3 million donations, so a 30% increase. Yeah, which is fabulous to see.
So some of them might be people doing multiples, but it's still
multiple donations,
people using it. And of course, we can't move on without saying we also saved our favourite vegan restaurant in Newtown.
Yeah, absolutely. Paolo actually might be on this call, and who is from Lentils as Anything. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the restaurant. And speaking to the trend we saw with small businesses, just again, falling through the cracks. I know they have job keeper support, but actually there's overheads and admin costs that you just can't foresee. We had actually quite a few music venues, restaurants that had been renovating for 6 weeks before we went into lockdown, who were just expecting to just reopen, and then it was all sidetracked. So I think when we talk about community, and close-knit networks, if you see your local business that you used to go to a lot suffering, you chip in $20 to try and keep it alive. And Lentils as Anything just put a call out to their network. They said they thought they were absolutely crazy that we're setting a target at $100,000 and eventually raised $370,000.
Terrific, yeah. Hey, we might go and have a chat to some of our community leaders now. And if you've got questions for anyone, please use the chat. So let's start off with Mariska. So this time last year, you didn't expect the year you were about to face, but within a few weeks, you guys were right in the firestorm, weren't you? So I'm interested in how the community in a time of crisis reacts, and then what drew you to the crowdfunding option on GoFundMe.
Well, we were actually all quite worried this year, well, last year, end of last year, because we thought the fire was going to be imminent. So we were really concerned. We had lots of meetings in the main hall, and the day that the fire, the night that the fire started, well, that was extremely frightening for everyone. The skies went from red 1 minute to black within 5-10 minutes. and as black as your TV screen. So it was really, really devastating. We just didn't know what was happening. We didn't know where the fire front was coming in. It hit Malakuta at the airport, and then it crossed over past our place. We didn't get affected at all, so we were extremely lucky. And then it went to Carbathon, which is another part of Malakuta, which has got a lot of trees, so a lot of homes burnt there too. So we were just we were basically very, very lucky. But we didn't know where the fires were. We didn't know whether it was just a few blocks away or whatever, but we had a lot of help from the fire brigade and police, and it was just absolutely amazing, the help that we have actually had. And plus at that time we had about 4,000 tourists here, so the roads were closed because we were always being told if there's a fire that's around, the roads will be closed. There's only one road coming in and out of Malakuta, and it's 24 k's in or out. And when you turn left or right from there, you're going into bush. So, you know, leaving Malakuta is not an option really. You had to stay here. So there was a lot of.
How did the community was meeting in the lead up? Obviously, government support was promised, but coming in slowly. So, what was the process of setting up the fund, and then how did that work for you? With
the fund?
Yeah.
Well, basically, I was very busy on the phone because of the fact that we ended up having. I put a few photos on the Malakuta community page that went viral all over the world, and so I was busy at home, and my niece asked me, you know, if she could help, and she decided to do the GoFundMe, which was excellent for us because we were able to get funding from donations from all over the world. You know, Malakuta went crazy. You know, we're the best kept secret in Victoria, they say, but gee, we're not a secret anymore. We're known all over the world now. So, and we're still getting money coming in. Wow. So it's
and what are the challenges when that money does come in fast? Like, I assume people aren't forming an orderly queue to get the support. So how did you work that, the distribution, once it was in?
That was the hardest thing. That was so hard because we actually asked people to see where they'd like the money donated to, and it was mostly fire related, and also wildlife. So it was a really hard time for us. There was 150 homes gone. We thought, well, with the money, the total of the money that we had, do we divide that money and give everyone about $700 each? Or do we do something a lot better for our community? Because we're so remote. For us, anyone in Malakuta to go to a hospital, it's 2 hours driving each way, and then possibly staying overnight. So what we did was we decided to put that money into the emergency services. With the emergency services, we pay. We've been dealing with them since February. So the first group that we got made contact with us was the fire brigade. They said they needed a new vehicle. So theirs was 10 years old and not reliable anymore. So we purchased an $85,000 vehicle, 4-wheel drive Toyota for them. They also wanted 2 water trailers to help with their water barrels. So we paid for them. So that was another $8,000. The SES at the moment still haven't got their vehicle because they haven't given us an account. They're still dealing with SES Victoria to see what they're supposed to have in their fit out. So that's going to be $85,000 to $100,000 also. We then asked the ambulance. The ambulance gave us several items at different times, and we've now spent just a fraction under $80,000. So we've paid for 10 defibrillators in Malakuta and Genoa and Gypsy Point, wow, which is within the 24 kilometres. We didn't have many defibrillators here, and we're an older. You know, it's like a retirement village, Malakuta. You know, there's only a third of them are young, and the other 2/3 are, you know, my age and older. So we didn't have the support. We had to get. We paid for an automatic CPR machine because our ambos are all getting older, so they really couldn't keep up the strength, you had to push down two times a second to get that heartbeat going. So we bought them a $17,500 CPR machine. We bought them a fluid warmer. So the fluid that goes from a container, from a bag into the person's body, if it's cold, if the fluid's cold, they get stomach cramps. So we've paid $5,500 for that. We paid just over $30,000 for the 10 defibrillators. We've paid for a vein finder. We've paid for a communication system. Our ambos need to travel at least, 2 hours to the closest town, but sometimes they have to go to Melbourne to do their training. Now they've got a $17,500 communication system that they can actually do their training here in Malakuta without having to drive a car somewhere, be on the road and worry about car accidents or whatever.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's
fantastic. So Nick, what really strikes me is that the fund actually gives the community a degree of control and agency and, dare I say, power. The normal stories when a bushfire hits is the community ends up feeling frustrated and outside the tent, but the funds has actually given you a degree of ownership on how you rebuild and how you respond. And Nick, that seems like a bit of is this specific to Malakuta, or are there other communities that had that sort of?
No, we've been going for 6 years, my husband and I. We're a Malakuta fundraising group. And we do our calendars every year, and we don't keep a single cent. We've always
seems like a really well organised PNC. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and that money's always gone to the emergency services and the wildlife. So we love the community so much that we really want to give something back, because we've received so much from the community and this beautiful piece of paradise that we're in. Yeah. So we've also bought for the medical clinic. We've also bought them a sleep apnea machine, because they have to go to Bega or Orbost, which is 2 hours each way, and they have to stay overnight, which is a huge cost. And so now we've paid for one of those machines. We've paid for a slit lamp, where a lot of the tourists, when they come here, a lot of kids get things in their eyes like fishing hooks and fishing line and all sorts of things. So this slit lamp, which was just under $10,000, actually takes your eyes, and that way they can operate, in your eyes, sort of thing. Take anything out of their eyes. So that was $10,000.
Excellent stuff. So Nicola, that's a great story of community building, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we have seen this model actually obviously successful in Malakuta, but Cobargo, Bateman's Bay, Kangaroo Island, a lot of communities have set up their own GoFundMe campaigns this year. And we were talking just before this call, and I think the thing that is really striking for us is that the demand and the need is still there. So I think we are hitting about 12 months on since the New Year's Eve bushfires and what the awful 30 days that followed, but we're still speaking to communities that have either run out of money, or they just are just at the start of their 5-year recovery journey. So they still need funds, and they are rallying. And Cobargo is a great example. Cobargo's actually just got council approval for a shelter in their town, which was funded by GoFundMe donations too.
Awesome. Hey, I might bring Whitney in. So it wasn't just communities feeling the heat over summer. You guys had huge demand on your services. We saw those terrible statistics on the impact of the bushfires on our native fauna, but you guys were dealing with it firsthand. So again, interested in what prompted you to go to the community to support your work.
So the Kerwin Wildlife Hospital is one of the busiest wildlife hospitals in the world. So last year we saw over 12,000 patients, and that number just doesn't seem to decrease. So we're always stressed from an operations budget year round. So when the bushfires did come about, it was during one of our busy peak seasons anyway, and the amount of patients they were seeing. So we were looking, one, to help meet our operating budget or exceed it, to add additional things like additional staff that could come in an hour or two earlier to help facilitate the number of patients that we were getting. On average, during that time frame, we were seeing about 90 to 95 patients per day. And it was not just bushfire, it was a culmination of drought, then we had flooding. So from a drought perspective, our senior vet had never really seen animals come in completely dehydrated and starving. That was the first time in his 20+ year career here at this hospital that we had seen those animals in that kind of condition. And then with flooding happening, flooding then came about, and the animals were cold and had illnesses, similar to humans, a form of pneumonia, and not really being able to find their way with the environmental challenges. And then bushfire came, and our wildlife were just in all different sorts. And it really puts a lot of strain on the staff here, because they're dealing every day with so many different species and so many different cases. And they really are well versed in dealing with environmental challenges. But when you have that combination come at you, the resourcing becomes quite limited. So the GoFundMe was a fantastic way for us to quickly reach out to the world for help. And we always look at our fundraising efforts not just necessarily to raise dollars. Dollars are valuable because that's what keeps us going, but it's the awareness, and it's creating the awareness that will keep the fundraising going for generations. Wildlife and the dedicated carers and the hospitals and the people that are really out there looking after our environment and animals, I think, get overlooked quite a lot from a perspective, because obviously humans are very valuable, structures are extremely valuable, and everything else that goes on in our world is very valuable. But we have to remember that our wildlife are extremely vulnerable, and if we don't care for them, they're not going to be here. And we kind of always look at ourselves as a charity that if you like hearing the birds chirp, or if you like seeing wildlife, then we're a charity that you can donate to that'll hopefully keep that legacy going for a very long time. So that awareness was massive for us from a GoFundMe perspective, because it helped us immediately leap forward on a global platform and share with the world how important and vulnerable places like ours are. And
it must have been amazing getting the messages and the donations from all around the world. It must have just made you feel like you were part of something bigger.
It was incredible. And we shared those messages as much as we could on a daily basis with our nurses and our vets and our techs and our 120 volunteers, and just letting them know that they weren't alone in this process, that the whole world was actually focused on helping us help wildlife, which was a valuable motivator to keep them going. So the whole GoFundMe platform is really well structured, because it allows a country on the other side of the world to reach out to so many other people and explain the value of what we're doing from a wildlife perspective. It allowed us to receive the funds almost immediately, which was necessary. When you're in the heat of the moment, we didn't have to wait 6 months for tied up money to come directly to the source, which is always a good thing. And it's interactive, so you could actually see the people who were giving money, leaving those messages, and then we would update as much as possible to let people know how we were actually dealing with the patients. We're almost a year on from one of our major intakes of animals, and I think we might have just shared it yesterday on GoFundMe, or at least on socials. We had a koala that was with us. Her name was Ember, and she was with us for 67 days with bushfire injuries. She was then passed on to one of our amazing care groups, Friends of Koala, because we have to put them sort of in their respective states, and we're a border state. So Friends of Koala were in New South Wales, even though we're in Queensland. And Ember remained with Friends of Koala until she was stable enough to go out into the wild. And her admission date was November 28th of 2019. And she was just spotted in the wild recently, looking healthy and happy. And we believe that she's pregnant.
Oh,
so it just gives you hope that the money and the work that our team and our carers and the community put into wildlife pays itself back. So that was a really good news story to come up with this week.
So how did the funds you raised shift the needle for your operations? What were you able to do?
Oh, listen, I mean, our hospital has been here for 31 years. Our hospital is run on a lot of borrowed or gifted equipment from human hospitals. Our x-ray machine is one of the oldest x-ray machines in the entire country, so we treat it with love and kindness. Our warming blankets, for example, previously were pillowcases with warm water bottles. Now, GoFundMe and the funds that we raised have been able to help us buy new equipment. So now we have menstrual blankets that blow warm heat right into the blanket to keep the animal warm while it's on the table. We have purchased this year a flexible endoscope, which is a $35,000 piece of equipment that allows the vets to go in and actually retrieve hooks and plastics from water birds and turtles that we would normally have to open up from a surgical perspective, or they use literally a plastic straw with little plungers on the end of it. So the staff here have to get very creative with their equipment, but fortunately we've been able to upgrade quite a bit of our machinery. We have new incubators. Just think of a human ER, and those pieces of equipment are things that we've been using that are 20 and 30 years old that are now a year old. So when we have our fundraising goals from a year-to-year perspective, our fundraising goals are just to turn on the lights, keep the staff employed, feed the animals, care for the animals, and the medication. So when things like the GoFundMe come up and the community reaches out for that extra level of support, that allows us to raise the bar and purchase things that we wouldn't normally be able to purchase. And that also includes research. So our team is very well versed in trying to help the future of wildlife. So that money has also allowed us to springboard our research programs in a way that we wouldn't have been able to do previous to this past year.
Fantastic. Nick, I guess there are campaigns like this that just blow you away at how they resonate with the community. And this one just seemed to grow and grow, didn't it?
I have to say, Whitney's team sent our team a video of koala kindergarten late last week, and I was just blown away. I was like, I'll redonate to this one. Yeah, the baby koalas, and I think that, and you're right, Whitney, that we always talk about at GoFundMe the power of one link. And I think given that GoFundMe obviously is a global network and a global brand, the power of that one link in reaching audiences beyond your small town or your small audience. Obviously, the GoFundMe links tend to grow within your primary network at first, but then with one person in your primary network sharing it with their networks, you suddenly reach a lot broader audience. And I think that's exactly what Whitney experienced in the Crumbin Wildlife Hospital.
Oh, huge. And we were so grateful for it.
Excellent. We might bring Corey. And now, Corey, your year wasn't quite as exciting as these other guys, but tell us a bit about your GoFundMe story.
So about, my GoFundMe's been going for a little bit now, but I'm a Kamilaroi man. I'm an Aboriginal man, and I've had an epiphany with science and animals my whole life, and it's that whole notion you can't be what you can't see. And we tend to, with Aboriginal children, we tend to say, oh, you're only great if you're a sports hero or an artist. But our people are the first scientists. We're the first astronomers. We're the first forensic scientists. If you're a white fella and you get lost in the bush, the first people to come to get you are the black fellas. And we have this history with science. So when I started Deadly Science, I was working at the University of Sydney 38 hours a week and working every single weekend, even Christmas Day. And I was talking to kids in Redfern, and we're talking about science, and we'd have these engaging conversations, which would be, how do we get oxygen up to the space station? Or how do we make a mouse glow in the dark? Or why does that animal do a certain behavior that is really fascinating? We'd have these conversations, and then basically what happened was that there were kids just like me who hadn't had those opportunities growing up. So I did what most weirdos do, and I Googled most remote schools, and I found a school in Australia with 15 books in its whole school. And if it's one thing that, 2020's taught us is that we've got to be together. We've got to be together. We're in this. And there's two things that we all need. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, where you come from, what you had for breakfast, and that's passion and purpose. So my passion and purpose was to make sure that these kids had the opportunity and the equal education that they deserve. They deserve to have the same books as everyone else. They deserve to have the same resources. So I started a second job. I started working at Handrop Pet Hotels on Gadigal country. And
I know it well. We visit there with our Labrador occasionally.
Yeah, well, I started working there, and I started working extra hours, and I started buying books and sending books off to remote communities and resources as well. And not just any resources, like resources that are going to spark the mind, find that passion so we can give these kids a purpose. And it's those two ingredients that we all need. And it was, it sort of grew from there. I started a GoFundMe page, and, I was stoked with getting $100 because it was going to pay for a box of books. And then it just sort of grew from there, and Deadly Science tended to grow, still grew, and I'm still working full time. I don't do Deadly Science as a job. I've invested my own funds into this, and, I've seen really good results. I've boosted attendance in schools by 40% just by providing the resources. The gap is not in knowledge, it's in resources. And, we've got kids now that have been inside the prison system that have come out, and they're not wanting to be deadly AFL football players. They want to be deadly scientists. And why not?
That's amazing.
So GoFundMe's helped me tremendously in growing this. And, I feel like the GoFundMe team have become part of the Deadly Science family over the last year. And, we've struck up a bit of a friendship with Grace and Nicola, and to date we've sent over 15,000 books to over 113 communities. We've worked with schools affected by the bushfires, Quabargo and Quormus schools. We provided students, because no one really thought about the gap in education that a bushfire or a natural disaster causes. Kids that lost their homes, they lost educational resources as well. So we made sure that we used a lot of our GoFundMe donations to support those kids. Broome Public School in Western Australia got burnt down by, a member of our community. And it was, there was a lot of shame about that. So we provided $7,000 to replace all the books that the school that were lost in school. And they have better books now than ever before. So it's impactful.
It strikes me that in another era, you would have seen a gap, which was opportunities for Indigenous kids to learn about science, and you would have written submissions to government, and you would have gone and knocked on doors and asked other people to fix the problem. The difference is you saw the gap and you fixed the problem yourself, because you've been able to access a base of supporters to help you address the issue rather than asking someone else to do it. Am I reading that right? And how's that made you feel that you can actually take an idea and turn it into something that does move the needle?
Oh, it's fantastic. And as an Aboriginal man growing up, my dad and my mum had a much harder, life than I did. I'm actually privileged. I'm privileged because, I'm a more acceptable version, and it's for their sacrifices, I'm able to succeed today and make a change. And for me, the government is still a little bit behind. For example, some organisations who only work with particular communities get beneficial treatment, which I think education should be for all. I don't think we should be putting communities up against each other or Aboriginal people up against each other. I think it's ludicrous that the government can give $50 million to an organisation and not collect any data back. And then, when an organisation like mine has to raise money, we have to use GoFundMe, but I'm so grateful that we do, because it shows that the public are really behind us. And, we're in this together, and that, there's no changing the history, and it's our history. Our people are the people that invented bread. And you know what? You should be proud of that too, because you come from this country, and you should be proud of our first scientists and our first astronomers, because you come from here.
So
and I think,
what's your vision of what you do with this program? Like, given growth and broader support, where would you like to take it?
Oh, I would love to, I'd love to get, not every kid I work with is going to become a scientist, but every child I work with should have the belief in the hope that they can. Science equals hope, and education is freedom. And I want to see, I want to see Australia as a whole get rid of educational poverty. I don't want to see kids in remote communities missing out just because of their skin color or where they come from. They should have the equal right and the equal resources, just like everyone else. And, and that doesn't change like the fact that, kids coming from overseas, they don't necessarily have the resources either. So, if there's one thing that I want people to get from Deadly Science is that you're part of this team, you're part of this family, and also, there's a whole, this is the passion and the purpose. And my passion is to make tomorrow a better day. And that's what today's purpose is, it's my passion. And I hope that you guys grab a little bit of that as well. And I can hear that in the Whitney's talk, and, and the community of Malakuta. It's about making tomorrows better, providing medical resources so that the older community can be looked after. So tomorrow will be a little bit easier. And that should be everyone's purpose.
Yeah. Nicola, it seems to me that the passion of people like Corey is the secret fuel that keeps GoFundMe going. And across a lot of your campaigns, I wouldn't say everyday Australians, because they're actually extraordinary Australians who step up and decide to make a difference.
Absolutely.
They're your petrol, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think there's what a lot of campaign organisers, when we speak to them, they also surprise ourselves. So they kind of are initially very shocked to even receive 5 donations. And then when they snowball from there, it's often the community leaders that we see, like Corey, there's a real common trait, very modest, very just
and where do the donations from Corey come from? So just talk us through how he goes from $100 to $1,000. So how do the networks build?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from what I've seen, Corey, you may have a different opinion on this, but Corey's just been incredible at being relentless and not giving up. So from the first donation to speaking to media, highlighting the issue, sharing updates about how the funds are being used, speaking to anybody and everybody who will listen, which eventually led to the project picking up on Corey's story. And then we saw a flood of donations roll in off the back of that segment. But then obviously with that national awareness, Corey has recently been championing for Wi-Fi access for a community in Redfern, and it's not necessarily just one single issue. I think with Corey's platform now, and huge congratulations to Corey, if we've not already mentioned it, for receiving this year's New South Wales Young Australian of the Year award, which started from his very first donation and day one of kind of raising his voice about something he was passionate about. So it was not, for some people it happens overnight, but I think Corey's a perfect example about how perseverance and resilience and never stop giving up on things you're passionate about.
And one thing you notice looking through this year's campaigns are that Indigenous initiatives really did resonate with givers, didn't it? I'm just looking here at Freeher, $1.2 million. Like, that's significant support from the community for a really important program.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I previously mentioned it all really, though we've always seen Indigenous rights championed on GoFundMe, and there's been some awesome campaigns over the years. In May, after the death of George Floyd over in the US, we did see a new kind of spotlight shone on the injustice here in Australia too. And a lot of the families who have been campaigning for justice after the loss of loved ones in police custody for over a decade now benefited from the attention to the local injustices and started GoFundMe campaigns to pay for their legal fees and to pay to get them to court cases and to reignite these cases. And there's been huge momentum and huge kind of like dial shift this year. And I'm really, obviously gutted that it took that moment to bring the spotlight back to Australia. But what we then saw off the back of that was a lot of people stepping forward and fundraising for charities like NATSL's, the Aboriginal Legal Centre, fighting for these to stamp out these issues. And actually NATSL's funded a whole entire salary for an Indigenous campaign to specifically focus on Aboriginal deaths in custodies for the next year. So they use GoFundMe to fundraise a salary, which is absolutely awesome, and again speaks to that that kind of bridging those gaps where funding is just missing, and it's important, it's needed, it's right now. We have to take action. You can call out to your community.
Yeah, I'd like to just go around the panel and just get the reflections on being part of something bigger. So for all of you, it probably feels like you've just gone and done this alone. But the fact that 1.2 million or 1.3 million donations this year over the platform means that you are part of a bigger network of people that both initiate calls to the public and also then work with what comes in. So is there that sense that you're not in this alone when you go through this process? And I'll start with you, Mariska. I can unmute you. It's always that moment. You there? I will go to Whitney first while we get Mariska back working.
No problem. It is definitely, it's a sense of global community instead of a local or national community that this platform has given us. And it gives me a hope that the message is actually getting out there about wildlife and our conservation and everything that goes with it. I think Corey also touched on an important point, is that the government doesn't fund his program, which is shocking. But the government funds us 30% of our year-to-year operating budget, and we are such a valued support to the community, and we're offering our services free of charge. And so I think that the organizations that use a platform such as this are organizations that are not gifted or funded by the government. And I think that that's an important message, that the community reaches out and says, you know what, we're going to look at these foundations or individuals that might have missed out on pools of money that were directed towards different elements, and really give to the root cause. And I think that it's been phenomenal that we don't have a lot of layers, so every dollar that's donated goes directly to the actual source. And I think that that's an important part from a GoFundMe platform, that the money actually goes to where it's most needed, and there's not that, and I mentioned it before, there's not that layer of red tape to actually facilitate. And we, from our funding from last year, were able to keep our doors open during all of the COVID pandemic. And we didn't close one single day, and that was because the community had supported us so tremendously during this this past 12 months. And it just, like I said before, it creates that awareness that I hope won't go away. It won't go away for Indigenous, it won't go away for small communities that don't have the equipment to fight fires, it won't go away for hospitals like ours and care groups and people that care so much about wildlife. So it's that messaging that we hope will continue to live on forever, that wouldn't have been brought to the attention if we hadn't had a global platform.
Now, Corey's got to rush off to the doctors. But before he goes, mate, I would imagine that's the case for you guys as well, that you're not employing a marketing department and a team of fundraisers to go and bother us on the street corners. But this allows you to sort of be in that world in front of people. And, you know, congratulations on all your work this year, but any final thoughts you'd like to share on what the ability to raise off this platform's done to you and your project?
I think it's given me hope. And again, it's given me the hope in that, you know, there's a lot of things to be angry at the world about, but I don't want to be angry. I want to actually enjoy, I want to enjoy seeing kids loving, learning. I want to enjoy seeing people who've had absolute tragedy and, rip for their communities. I want to see them rebuild and, enjoy life. And, I want to see wildlife recover. I'm a former zookeeper myself. I started off in the zoos, and, I was often told I couldn't do things as a young fella. And I want to see, I just want to see people happy. And if COVID has taught us anything, and the bushfires have taught us anything, that we are stronger as one, and maybe we should spend less time on our phones and maybe yarning with each other and just trying to understand each other a bit better. And, you know, we call it caring for country as Aboriginal people, and we look after all our wildlife and we look after the land. But, you know, whilst, you know, the world is spinning and everyone's going, oh, COVID, you know, I think we should be looking after the country and each other. Because if we don't look after each other, what else have we got?
Yeah, you know, I think to your point of looking at the phone, I think that's totally right. People that are regulars to Australia at Home know how skeptical I am about the idea that everyone is actually connected through the social media platforms. Although what I think is interesting about the GoFundMe platform, that the connection is about ideas and it's about support rather than just clicks and likes. I think we've now got Mariska unmuted. So any final parting thoughts on being part of a community of communities there, and what you're feeling looking forward to 2021 as well?
Well, I think we're just going to grow as a community. We're getting more and more things for Malakuta, so we're sort of, our remote villages, self-supportive. We're just getting more and more recognition, especially Malakuta fundraising group with the calendars and the books the day the Malakuta turned red. And we're getting a lot of information from, you know, a lot of help through GoFundMe. That's been fantastic. So we couldn't have done it without them. And basically we're extremely lucky that, you know, unlucky in a way that we've had the fires and a lot of devastation here. But we are now lucky that we've actually got a lot of support for anyone that's sick, that needs help. And the community, the elder community, very grateful that, you know, this has all happened in a way, because now that they've got, you know, the help from all these items that they would have never ever had. They can't save for these items. They can't sell that many hot dogs or hamburgers to get all these things. So it's been absolutely fantastic, and there's so much support now. It's really good. It really is good.
Yeah, fantastic.
We're very
Good on
lucky.
all of you. You know, Nick, I think when the history of 2020 is written for Australia, it's going to be about how our institutions stood up, how we looked after each other, how we weren't prepared just to say freedom, freedom and forget about other people. And I think, like, I don't think GoFundMe is going to be at the front page of that history, but you've really contributed to it and creating that sense that we're not all in this alone. So, you know, congratulations on the Year in Giving report, and also congratulations on the work you and your team do. It's been great working with you over the last months. And I just guess, you know, finally from you, like, what are your hopes for what happens with this platform over the next 12 months? And if people want to be more involved, what can they do?
I think what we've seen this year is we can't predict the future. I think we tried to late last year based on trends we've seen over the past couple of years, but I think it's been a really pivotal year in just stopping and actually making sure that our team is set up to react and respond to wherever society takes us. So we have a global team that work around the clock, and we you know, are constantly trying to, you know, use our product in ways that we haven't before. And I think what I see over the next year is that I think we're going to, hopefully not, but I suspect we'll see with kind of no vaccine in sight for Australia and uncertainty about the borders opening up, we'll continue to see unexpected uses of our platform. So they can't predict what will happen, and we are just going to make sure that we're here and set up and ready to wade through the mud with our users as and when they need us.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, everyone. You know, we thank you all for your time and being part of today's discussion. A special thank you to our guests. And for those that are regulars with Australia at Home, we've still got a few more events before the end of the year. We've got a launch of the Meanjin Quarterly. It's actually their 80th birthday edition at 5 o'clock tomorrow night. So that should be in your invite list. We've got our final Tech Talk of the year with Human Rights Commissioner Ed Santo and Lizzie O'Shea from Digital Rights Watch, Dan Stinton from The Guardian on Friday, and then next Tuesday, the final Political Geek Fest with me and Catherine Murphy on Tuesday. So you're not quite done with us yet, but it's been great having you for the journey today. So take care, everybody, and have a great rest of the, what is it? Tuesday?
Thank you,
Wednesday.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Peter.
Bye.
Bye.